When I first was writing the content for this episode, I wanted to call it discipline versus grace. But the more I got to thinking about it, it's not a battle between being a disciplined human being and giving ourselves the grace to rest, to get done the other things that we need to get done, or just to recuperate from the hard work that we're doing. It's a partnership. How can we know when do I need to buckle down and keep working harder, or when do I need to recharge? When do I need to take a break, go on vacation? I mean, whatever the case is, whatever you define grace as. One of the biggest ways that I know that I need to exercise more discipline, or better put, when I know I need to get back to work versus take a break, is when I feel unmotivated. Because motivation is not a permanent feeling that we have. There are going to be days when we don't feel motivated to practice. You have to be willing to set those standards for yourself and then have the discipline to, even though you may not feel like it, to keep to those standards. Discipline has to include those habits that help you become a more well-rounded, healthy musician, because discipline, we always think about discipline as just like grinding away, hustling, sweating in the practice room. But a lot of times, discipline actually means taking the breaks that you need. Anytime that I feel anxious about not taking time off, that usually means that I need to give myself that break. At any time, if you feel like you are using discipline as a weapon against one of the other areas of your life, that you give yourself the grace to take a step back, realign yourself, and keep going with the overall goal and the overall standard of becoming the best human being that you can. Hey, welcome back, everybody. Today's episode has been a topic that has just been floating around my mind for quite a long time. And the reason why I put it off until now in talking about it with you guys is because it's a kind of a hard thing to quantify. And that is the principle of discipline. When I first was writing the content for this episode, I wanted to call it discipline versus grace. And we'll talk about what I mean by that in a little bit. But the more I got to thinking about it, it's not a battle between being a disciplined human being and giving ourselves the grace to rest, to get done the other things that we need to get done, or just to recuperate from the hard work that we're doing. It's a partnership between those two attributes that we have, those two practices that we use to become who we want to become, to come back from an injury, to become a better musician, to become a better human being. So the first thing I want to really dig into is this principle of discipline, because for me, the reason why I'm recording this in the first place is because I have always had an interesting relationship with discipline, with becoming who I want to become and doing the things that are necessary to do that. And I think that that's a question that a lot of us have, is how can we know when do I need to buckle down and keep working harder, or when do I need to recharge? When do I need to take a break, go on vacation? I mean, whatever the case is, whatever you define grace as. And I'll preface this by saying that this is going to look different for every single one of you. I can't say that what works for me as far as like how I conceptualize discipline and what that looks like for me, that may not be the same thing for you. Our bodies are all different. The capacity of what we can take before needing a break is going to be different, physiologically and psychologically. But I do believe that there are some principles that we can all apply to help us to utilize these two concepts to our advantage. Before getting into discipline, I want to just say that before you identify what discipline looks like for you, you need to define what are your standards. This is talked a lot about in the personal development space, and also for me personally, and I grew up learning about standards in my faith and in my church, specifically about what are the things that I am going to do and what are the things I'm not going to do. But it's based on the foundation, the principle of who am I wanting to become? Who am I now? So a standard for me growing up was that there are certain things that I watch and certain things that I don't watch. And the reason why I have that practice in my life is because that I believe that I am a child of God. And what this could look like in the musical habits that you have is that I am going to practice X amount of time every day. That looks different for all of you. Make sure that you're keeping an account of how your body is feeling. Listen to your body and your mind in that. But a standard could also be, I am going to exercise every single day or 6 days a week. Every single day, probably not the best idea because you want to give your body that rest, which we'll talk about in a second. The concept, the principle behind this is that you are creating habits that are, as James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, he talks about, is they're all a vote for who you want to be becoming. The goal is not to just eat healthier, it's to become a healthier person, right? And so this has a lot to do with discipline because the standards that we set for ourselves need to be votes for the person that we want to become. I hope that if you're listening to this show, that your goal is to become a healthier musician, a more well-rounded musician, ultimately the best musician that you can be. And that includes all these other different practices that don't necessarily come in the practice room. And so having the discipline to show up, to accomplish those habits, to keep consistent with them, that is paramount. There are a lot of things that I have noticed within my life that I wanted to share with you that contribute to how I conceptualize discipline, what discipline looks like for me. One of the biggest ways that I know that I need to exercise more discipline, or better put, when I know I need to get back to work versus take a break, is when I feel unmotivated. Because motivation is not a permanent feeling that we have. There are going to be days when we don't feel motivated to practice, where we don't feel motivated to do the physical therapy exercises that our doctor is giving us to come back from our injury. There's going to be days where we don't feel motivated to call that person that we need to talk to get back from our injury. That's where discipline comes into effect, because discipline is about making the choices that help you become the person that you want to become, that help you to maintain the standards that you have set for yourself. And those are standards that you have to do for yourself. I can't tell you what those are. But you have to really be honest with yourself and define who you want to become and see where those dividing lines are. I don't necessarily like the word boundaries because I feel like it's over commercialized and people set boundaries where it may not be as helpful. But you have to be willing to set those standards for yourself and then have the discipline to, even though you may not feel like it, to keep to those standards. And one of those standards, and this is where grace comes into effect, because for me, discipline meant I was in the practice room every day for 4 hours a day. Doesn't matter what else I had going on in my life. I was showing up every single day, no matter what. And that led to me creating unhealthy habits, like I was going to bed way too late. I was not drinking enough water. I was not getting any social interaction, which is a part of our overall health, and things like that. And so discipline has to include those habits that help you become a more well-rounded, healthy musician, because discipline, we always think about discipline as just like grinding away, hustling, sweating in the practice room. But a lot of times, discipline actually means taking the breaks that you need, taking a day off, not beating your head against the wall when something is not working in the practice room and you're just trying to repeat it until it somehow clicks and you get the passage right. Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the show. I just wanted to jump in here real quick and tell you about something that I'm really, really excited about. For a while now, I have wanted to create an even more effective resource than just the podcast that injured musicians can go to receive the support that they need. And recently I did just that. So write this down. Trust the Process Podcast Injured Musician Support Group. I know it's a long title. We're still working on that part. But this is a place where people can go now, injured musicians and even musicians who have gone through injury in the past, and people that help musicians go through injury, where they can go to receive the support that they need, whether that be ask questions, share their victories, share their frustrations, and overall just receive the community and the support that they need in a very proactive, intentional way. And so I just ask that you guys support these injured musicians by sharing this group with them, that they can receive the support that they need. Okay, enjoy the rest of the show. That's where grace comes into effect for me. So discipline is when I don't feel motivated to do something. That's where I feel like I need more discipline, where I need to quit the negotiating with myself. For me, negotiating is, if I find myself negotiating with myself about whether or not I should do something, then that means that I need to really check in again with my discipline, if I am staying constant with who I want to become, that foundation of my identity, which is not wrapped up in my instrument, but wrapped up in who I am trying to become as a human being in general. And so as we're moving forward with this topic, I want you just to really internalize the fact that discipline is only as helpful when your needs are being met, when you're living up to your standards. And so moving into this principle of grace, when do you know that you need to give yourself grace versus when you need to exercise discipline or strengthen that partnership? For me, discipline becomes less helpful when my other needs are not being met. That looked like in the practice room for me is when I felt like I could not take a break. I think I mentioned on the podcast before, one of my favorite quotes about practicing is from Dr. Scott Belk, who is the trumpet teacher at Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music. And he says in one of his world famous lip slur books that when you feel like you cannot take a day off or take a break from your practicing, that is the first sign that you're micromanaging your practicing. And that is often coupled with anxiety. And so I think in most cases, for my money, for my opinion, in my life, anytime that I feel anxious about not taking time off, that's usually means that I need to give myself that break. Another way that I can tell that I need a break is when practicing just isn't becoming effective. If you're running through a passage and it's not like you're spending 20 minutes on a passage, your brain is tired, your body is fatigued, and that's actually past the point where you need to take a break. Where even though on paper you were supposed to practice an hour today and it's not working out, that's where you give yourself a little bit of grace, take the break that you need so that you can come back to the practice room and ultimately perform better than you did without the break. And that's where curiosity for me comes into effect of like, what are the things that I need to do to complete this passage, to nail this passage? A lot of times it means doing something other than just repeating the passage, getting a drink of water, taking a break, taking a walk. I read an article that changing your focal distance, meaning like how close is the object that you're looking at. So that can help recharge your brain in taking a break and practicing. Like I said, this is a tough thing to quantify, a tough partnership to quantify, the partnership between discipline and grace. And that's something that everyone has to do for themselves. You know your limits, you know your physical, your mental limits, you know what peak days look like for you, and you know what less than peak days look like for you. And you have to define first and foremost what your standards are going to be. What are you going to do and what are you not going to do? And so I would highly recommend that everyone that they have as their part of their standards, that they show up for themselves every day in every aspect of their life. That means showing up for themselves, yes, with practicing, because you have to have that discipline to get better at your craft, but the discipline of taking regular breaks, the discipline of getting proper nutrition, the standard of social interaction, because we are social beings and we need that interaction to stay healthy. I mean, what did the pandemic teach us, guys? And things like that. So my invitation for all of you is to set those standards for yourself and define what discipline is going to look like for you in each of those categories, and what, as a kind of an umbrella or as an understanding that you have with yourself, is that at any time, if you feel like you are using discipline as a weapon against one of the other areas of your life, that you give yourself the grace to take a step back, realign yourself, and keep going with the overall goal and the overall standard of becoming the best, healthiest, most fulfilled human being that you can. And so I hope this has been helpful. Keep on keeping on, guys. Send me a text in the show notes of the audio episodes of the podcast, and I'd love to hear from you. And keep on keeping on, guys, and keep trusting the process. Hey, before you go, we need your help with something real quick. Somewhere out there's a musician who is going through an injury or just a tough time. There may even be an educator with a student in that situation that they don't know how to help. We need your help in getting this message to them. Would you do them the favor of sharing this episode on your socials and with your friends? Also, cliche that it may have become, leaving a rating and a review actually does help people find us, not just boost our ego. So would you take a quick second and leave us a review so that musician can find us more easily? If you want to reach out to me personally, I would love to hear from you. Just look for the Send Us a Text Message button in the show notes of the episode. You can do that on any episode on your chosen podcast platform except YouTube. If you have a suggestion for a guest or topic to cover, shoot me an email at trustprocesspodcast@gmail.com or send me a message on Facebook or Instagram. I want to extend another heartfelt thanks to my team, without which this podcast would not be able to happen. Thanks to Daniel Baldwin, our audio engineer, Kevin West, our music and sound effects coordinator, and Dana Lovell, our promotional materials coordinator. So to all of you out there in podcast land, keep on keeping on and trust the process.